I'm Nick Payton-Walsh in Beirut, and this is CNN.
It is Tuesday, October the 15th. I'm Max Foster in London.
And I'm Pauline Chu in Hong Kong. Welcome to World Business Today. These are our top stories. Hopes rise and markets climb as a U.S. debt deal seems to be taking shape.
The UK is courting Chinese business and investment and opening up its banking sector to do so.
But to see where China's investing, just follow the pandas. We'll tell you about an unconventional economic indicator.
But first, these are the top stories we're following here at CNN. In the Philippines, rescue and recovery efforts are underway after a 7.1 magnitude earthquake struck Tuesday morning. Officials say at least 20 people were killed. Nearly 36 people are missing. It's feared some may be trapped underneath collapsed buildings. In the next hour, Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif will join ministers from the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany. They're in Geneva for nuclear talks. Tehran has expressed optimism, but a senior Obama administration official says Washington doesn't expect a breakthrough overnight. It's been 6 years since Madeleine McCann vanished from her parents' hotel room in Portugal. Now British police say they're seeking this man for questioning. They say 2 people have independently come up with the same name for him.
And back to business news right now. Stock markets around the world are rising on hopes U.S. lawmakers can avoid a government default. Wall Street closed higher on Monday after Congress moved closer to a compromise to fund the government and to let it borrow more money. Senior Republicans and Democrats in the Senate said they're making good progress, although an agreement isn't yet in place. A planned meeting between President Barack Obama and congressional leaders was postponed on Monday to allow lawmakers to continue discussions within the Senate.
Mr. President, we know this has been a difficult time for everyone.
Lo and behold, 2 experienced Capitol Hill brawlers, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid and Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, may have actually found the path to budget peace in Washington.
We are not there yet, but tremendous progress, and everyone just needs to be patient.
Both men shared the news on the Senate floor that they are close to a deal that would both reopen the government and raise the nation's debt ceiling before a potential default in less than 2 days.
I think it's safe to say we've made substantial progress, and we look forward to making more progress in the near future.
Is there a deal?
But as Vice President Joe Biden indicated by staying mum on the subject, it's not over yet. Here's how the deal would work. The government funded through mid-January. The debt ceiling extended to early February. In a nod to GOP opposition to Obamacare, changes to that law are also under consideration, including new income verification requirements for health care subsidies.
Hi. How are you?
Those are tweaks to Obamacare the president may not support, but he's all but pressuring Republicans to take the Senate deal.
If Republicans aren't willing to set aside some of their partisan concerns in order to do what's right for the country, we stand a good chance of defaulting.
A new ABC News Washington Post poll finds the public is furious with the GOP, with 74% saying they disapprove of how Republicans have handled budget negotiations, versus 53% who feel the same about the president. But some House Republicans are holding their ground, still demanding concessions.
I'd like to do something that he gets something and I get something.
Democratic Senator Barbara Boxer compared the GOP's tactics to acts of violence.
When you start acting like you're committing domestic abuse, you've got a problem. I love you, dear, but, I'm shutting down your entire government.
Jim Acosta, CNN, Washington.
Well, it really is the talk of the European markets. They seem to be picking up a bit of optimism that we'll see a breakthrough soon in Washington. As you can see, all the main markets are up this morning. At the same time, yesterday, they were largely down. The luxury goods brand Burberry is down more than 5% on news that its longtime CEO, Angela Adrents, is leaving. We'll have more on that in just a moment.
Well, here in Asia and in the Asia-Pacific region, Max, Hong Kong and Tokyo are trading up after coming back from a 3-day holiday weekend. They were helped by the signs of progress that were just mentioned in the U.S. Now, the Nikkei is up by 0.25%, but it just released revised industrial production figures for the month of August, and factory output dropped double the preliminary estimate, down 0.4% year-on-year. So not good news from that angle. Mainland China stocks are down. They ended the session down 0.2%. Railway shares dropped back after strong gains on Monday. Daqing Railway was down nearly 2%. Now, the Bain Aussie benchmark is up right now on up nearly 1% on the optimism there on Capitol Hill. Now, Australia's central bank, the Reserve Bank of Australia, they released their minutes from the October meeting, and it showed that interest rates will most likely remain at a record low of 2.5% to help buffer its slowing economy, which has suffered from the slowdown in the mining sector. Now, the optimism started on Wall Street on Monday, and Zane Asher tells us how it all played out.
Stocks here on Wall Street finished modestly higher on Monday. Headlines of a deal in the works to avoid hitting the debt ceiling reversed losses earlier in the session. Trading was light as Monday marks the Columbus Day holiday here in the U.S. Banks, many businesses, and even the bond market were closed. But stocks got a jump on the week. The Dow gained 64 points, or just less than 0.5%. The Nasdaq rose 0.2%. The S&P 500 closed higher as well. Shares of Netflix jumped nearly 8%. Netflix is reportedly in talks with two major U.S. cable TV providers trying to bring its video streaming service to cable boxes. But the reports say negotiations are in the early stages. Last month, Netflix signed deals with a cable provider in the UK and another in Sweden. Those deals bring Netflix to TiVo boxes for customers there. Some notable corporate earnings on tap for Tuesday. Citigroup and Coca-Cola report before the opening bell. Tech giants Yahoo and Intel post results after the close. That's a wrap of the day on Wall Street. I'm Zane Asher in New York.
Another big name in tech is speaking directly to customers. BlackBerry has placed an open letter in more than 30 newspapers, this one in the FT, the Financial Times, telling users the company is not going under. It says these are challenging times for us, and we don't underestimate the situation or ignore the challenges. We are making the difficult changes necessary to strengthen BlackBerry. It comes after a long decline for the Canadian company. BlackBerry pioneered smartphones, but it's been left behind by rivals like Apple and Samsung. This year, its stock has dropped 31%, and it's tentatively accepted a takeover bid. And revenue fell 45% last quarter after its latest model failed to take off as hoped. But what's interesting here is that they talk about one of their greatest advantages being the typing experiences. No ifs, buts or ands about it. Pauline, it is the best typing experience. I think that is what's largely helped it in recent years, actually.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people say that they do like that old keyboard. It's very tactile instead of what we have on smartphones right now. But Max, don't you get the sense of urgency there that they are looking for a buyer, especially when you see the decline in the stock price? And they do say that one of their assets is having $2.6 billion in cash, but a lot of that may be burned because they have to pay for severance packages when they lay off 40% of their workforce. So interesting that they've put out this ad in some of these major newspapers. So we'll see where that goes. Well, staying in the tech sector and also retail, Burberry's CEO is moving to Apple. Angela Ahrendts will become the tech company's senior vice president of retail and online stores, a position Apple says was newly created just for her. She will report directly to the Apple CEO, Tim Cook. Ahrendts has been with Burberry since 2001. The British fashion house has appointed Chief Creative Officer Christopher Bailey as its next CEO. And as we know, when we look at Apple's stock price, where it is now, it's about half of where it was at its highs about a year ago. And Max, we know that part of its success had always been that retail experience, going into those Apple stores and really getting your hands on those new gadgets. And Angela Ahrendts has been credited with turning around Burberry. They just came out with new figures saying that their growth increased 17% so far this year. So it'll be interesting. You know, they've created this position for her. So we shall see if she will be able to bring that retail experience back to Apple.
Well, she's an amazing figure. I mean, I've met her a couple of times because she's such a towering figure here in London, but she really has transformed that brand. It was a really naff brand at one point, and she created this very cool brand. And largely through social media, they are literally the biggest luxury brand on social media. If you look at their figures, so 200 million followers on Twitter, 15 million fans on Facebook. So that's really how she's done it. And I remember meeting this young guy who was in charge of all of the social media around Burberry, and what he would do is, I don't know if you remember, they would release the pictures behind the scenes of the new outfits, if I can call them that, before they come out on the catwalk, and that's how they built up that massive following and caused that buzz around them. So I'm sure that's something that she'll look into at Apple, but she's a pretty impressive figure. Still to come on World Business Today, breaking down barriers. British ministers are on a mission to attract Chinese investors. We'll be live in Beijing for the latest on that.
Africa Business Profiles, in association with Energy Group.
By nature, Africans, like other people elsewhere, are very aspirational. They want to improve their livelihoods. They want to become business people. They want to make more money. They want to have choice. So they do not want to be told, you will use this seed, you will use this technology. They want to be given choice. We have a tendency globally just to come and instruct people and tell them what to do and show them how to do it. But we've learned that our approach of inclusive innovation, our approach of saying no one entity can solve the challenges that we face, but collaboration with NGOs, with communities, with academia, with other companies. Through this collaboration, we are able to really make science more relevant and solve local problems.
அடிக்கடி கரண்ட் ஆஃப் ஆறதுனால நான் கடையை மூடிடலான்னு இருந்தேன். ஆனா இன்னைக்கு பிசினஸ் எக்ஸ்பேன்ஷன் பண்ணலாம்னு முடிவு பண்ணிருக்கேன்.
Ardhi hii ilikuwa tasa. Hakuna maji, hakuna chakula. Kisha siku moja maisha yetu ilibadilika.
People ask how I keep smiling in such a critical place. I say thanks to Kirloskar.
Kirloskarக்கு நன்றி. அது என் வாழ்க்கையை மாத்திடுச்சு.
Kilota ilibadilisha hatima yetu.
My mission is to get the viewers to understand the world around them. People are starved for news about the world and context about the world. The show is able to appeal to people at every level.
Fareed Zakaria GPS, Sunday on CNN. Tonight on CNN, International Desk with Hala Garani, followed by Arman Paul. Then CNN News Center with Aisha Sasay. It's your new evening lineup. Tonight on CNN.
The UK is stepping up efforts to strengthen economic ties with China. The British finance minister is set to announce new terms that make it easier for Chinese investment banks to expand in the UK. George Osborne says it's his, quote, personal mission to see China develop its currency, the renminbi, internationally through London. Osborne is currently on a 5-day tour of China. On Monday, he announced that the UK will relax visa application rules for Chinese visitors because in the past it's been quite bureaucratic. David McKenzie joins us now live from CNN Beijing with more on these agreements. David, why are we seeing these two countries on such a big charm offensive?
Well, certainly the British politicians here on the charm offensive. I think it's been a really lengthy freeze of diplomatic relations since David Cameron, the Prime Minister of Britain, met with the Dalai Lama, the spiritual leader of Tibet. So certainly since then, the Chinese authorities haven't really wanted any big delegations coming here. Now it seems like they're going big on business over politics. Boris Johnson, the Mayor of London, and George Osborne, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Finance Minister, effectively, of the UK, here to really push for business ties between China and the UK and ties between people as well. They're really welcoming Chinese students, which bring a lot of money into the UK, as well as those very concrete moves to develop trade between the British pound and the yuan. They want to really make London the financial center outside of the region for trading the renminbi as China looks to make its currency a real player in the global currency markets. So certainly a big charm offensive. It's all about business, not about politics. And these two men certainly here in force in Beijing, and both of them on separate tours through the country through the week. Pauline?
And also a big victory for China in terms of pushing their currency and internationalizing it, which has been a priority for them. Now, I understand that the media there in China is abuzz with Osborne actually being upstaged by Mayor Johnson. What exactly is going on there?
Well, it's hard to upstage Boris Johnson. He's a larger-than-life character. He's really famous within Britain for his politically savvy talking with the press and others. It's really the British media, in fact, that has played up this angle, saying that the Mayor of London upstaging his political colleague, but rival, obviously, as well, in some senses. And certainly, when they spoke together at Peking University, it was Boris Johnson who made the allusions to Harry Potter and ways that the Chinese could get excited about Britain, even throwing in James Bond there. But in a way, the big stick's been carried by the Chancellor of the Exchequer. He met with the Vice Premier of particularly involved in financial issues, and that key agreement where the UK is trying to outstrip its rivals in mainland Europe in becoming a key trading country for the Chinese currency. Certainly the UK is looking to increase those ties, in particular with the deep pockets that China has for investing in infrastructure within the UK, particularly Heathrow Airport recently, and now Manchester Airport. China is really throwing its hard-earned money towards the UK, and obviously both countries trying to exploit that relationship.
Yeah, there's certainly a big flurry of activity and agreements being signed, and very colorful video there as we see Mayor Johnson buying some things, some pastries there on the streets of Beijing. David, thank you very much. David McKenzie there live from Beijing. Well, a survey of CNN Money economists says that China's economy grew in the third quarter of the year. GDP rose by 7.8% compared to last year, which is faster than both the previous quarters of 2013. Now, Beijing is due to release its official GDP number on Friday. Economists have forecast around a 7.6% rise, which is just slightly above the official target of 7.5%, Max.
And what's interesting here is if the US defaults on its debts, that's the big story we've been talking about today, much of that will be felt by its main creditors across the world, one of which is China. These are the top three holders of US treasuries, each with much to lose. China currently owns nearly $1.3 trillion in US government-issued debt. It's an extraordinary figure. Japan, though, as well, owns about $1.1 trillion. And in third place, Caribbean bank centers, relatively less, but $288 billion worth of treasuries. Further down the line is Russia, which still has at least $100 billion worth of US treasuries. Richard Quest sat down with the country's finance minister, Anton Sulanov, at IMF headquarters in Washington last week and asked him for Moscow's take on the US debt crisis.
I wouldn't say it was a U.S. crisis. There is, of course, a certain lack of understanding, a lack of desire to solve the problem between the Obama administration and Congress. Nevertheless, I hope this situation will be resolved soon, because really no one needs this. The Americans don't need it. The rest of the world, including Russia, doesn't need it. And we hope that in the coming days it will be possible to settle it.
President Putin at the APEC summit was very clear about the risks because the dollar is the world's reserve currency. And that's something you must be obviously deeply aware of.
Да, действительно, доллар – это мировая резервная валюта. Yes, it's true. The dollar is the world's reserve currency. The American economy is growing at a good rate. American treasuries have a high degree of reliability. So Russia keeps about 45% of all its reserves in U.S. treasuries. And we don't believe we need to change that policy now. We hope that the current tension with Congress will be resolved. We hold long-term treasuries, so we don't believe we need to change our strategy.
That was the Russian finance minister talking about the US debt ceiling, just one of the international officials expressing concern over the situation in Washington.
Well, coming up next, India learned its lessons from the past. We'll show you how the government handled a very dangerous storm well before it arrived. Stay with us. We'll be back.
The 60th Macau Grand Prix, coming soon.
The table is set for you to get a different view of China.
Join me for an intimate and revealing discussion with people who know China better than anyone.
This month on China, cracking down on political corruption.
You mentioned for the Chinese Communist Party, fighting corruption is a matter of life and death. Why is it a matter of survival for the party? Why is it that critical?
It's a view from the inside out. On China, Wednesday, only on CNN.
"21 people are dead in eastern India after the most powerful storm to hit the country in 14 years, tropical cyclone Pailin. But as Malika Kapoor explains, it could have been a lot worse.
Odisha 1999. A fierce cyclone leaves 10,000 dead. This month, another cyclone pounds Odisha. The death toll is 21. We knew beforehand. We had been warned, this slum resident says. The Ajim family says the local government saved their lives. They were evacuated to a shelter a day before the cyclone hit. 14 years ago, they were not so lucky. Last time, no one knew there would be a cyclone. Everyone was holding their children and running, falling. Some buildings fell, schools fell, says Akhtarum Parveen. 2 people in our family died. Our house became a cremation ground. India has changed since then. Roads and basic infrastructure have improved, making it easier to mobilize people. A telecommunication revolution means almost everyone has access to a cell phone.
Then we were technologically very backward. Even I remember 2 days prior to the cyclone hitting, we were not having adequate information. Now we knew precisely when the cyclone originated in Thailand. We are monitoring every hourly.
High-tech information disseminated in a low-tech way. Many residents lived right here during the 1999 cyclone before these children were born. They say this time, though, it was different. They knew the cyclone was coming because they'd heard about it on the television, they'd read about it in the papers. Plus, they say, a local government official came knocking on each door, telling people they must evacuate. The Ajim family and their neighbors moved into a local school, one of almost 300 shelters set up along India's northeast coast. Lives were saved because of early and orderly evacuations. As these adults watch their neighborhood come alive again, they say they're glad they're home and that their children can play freely because, as Sheikh says, this time the government got it right. Malika Kapoor, CNN, Bhubaneswar, India.
While India is dealing with the cleanup, Japan is beginning to feel the impact of a typhoon that's on course for Tokyo right now. Meteorologist Ivan Cabrera joins us with the latest from the International Weather Center. And Ivan, a couple of days ago, you called this region a typhoon factory. I think you were spot on with that.
Pretty much. Thank you for that. But my goodness, I wish that I had been wrong. And in fact, we have more in the pipeline here. So even after Pailin, and then Nari, and now Wipa. We got more to come, but let's focus in on what we have currently here, which is this typhoon bearing down on Japan, mainly Japan and Tokyo. This time around, you will not be bypassed. You're getting what I think will be the brunt of this. I don't think we're going to see 150 km/h winds, but we're going to get close. We're going to have winds anywhere from 100 to 120 kilometers per hour, very close to Tokyo, and that is going to not only cause damage, but of course the flooding that's going to come with the rain is going to be significant, and that is going to be causing flooding as well. It's going to be a mess in the next 24 hours here. In fact, the rain has already commenced here. So what will happen now is it'll just get heavier, and the winds will begin to pick up as well as the center of the typhoon begins to approach. Its closest pass will be through the day tomorrow. But there you see this area of red. That's indicative of upwards of 250 to look at this. Tokyo, my goodness, upwards of 300 millimeters of water falling in just a couple of days, along with winds that are going to exceed 100 kilometers per hour if one of our models is right. And I think this one will be. Look at this. Look at these winds, not just at the coast, but this is inland winds as well. Again, widespread damage, a potential here with this storm. You're watching us from Tokyo. I know you've been informed and you've been watching us and you know it's coming, so you are prepared. No question about that. Medium chance of development. This is the next one that we're watching. Nari, of course, is the latest storm. That is impacting with Vietnam. Final advisory written on this one. It's just a big rainmaker now. Take a look at the scene. We'll leave you with pictures of how it looked right along the coast of Vietnam as the storm began to move in. This is from one of our reporters there recording from his hotel. You can see the surf in the background there, the breakers there just coming in with ferocious winds. And then, of course, came the deluge that is now going to be the story with Nari. It is no longer a wind maker. Now, the flood and landslide threat, Pauline, is going to be the issue here over the next few days. Behind me, you'll be able to see that we are forecasting once again with another storm here, 100 to 300 millimeters of water here as well. And then again, there's that third storm that doesn't even have a name yet. We'll get to that later.
Okay, a 1, 2, 3 punch. You've given us a fair warning.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Ivan. We appreciate it. Max?
Lawmakers may be getting closer to a deal, but it doesn't come soon enough for the federal workers forced to take temporary leave. We'll hear their stories when we return.
The Energy Group, one of Africa's most diversified corporations, delivers prosperity to growth regions in Africa. With a portfolio incorporating key sectors, which include furniture manufacture, media, insurance in Abuja, Dubai and London, and education in Sao Tome and Principe. The Energy Group, building business in Africa and beyond.
These are the wrecks of just some of the vessels that have brought thousands of immigrants here to Lampedusa.
This is taking you to the heart of the story.
You can see some of the refugees have left items of clothing, a pair of jeans here. You get a sense that if you imagine hundreds of people crammed onto this ship, just how desperate those making that dangerous journey from North Africa to here must be.
This is CNN.
This is one of the most prominent features of the African continent, the Sahara Desert. I've come to a place on the edge of the Sahara, which for centuries has been described as an oasis. I'm Errol Barnett, inside Africa, and this is the starting point for my journey this week, which for the first time is through the North African country of Tunisia.
Inside Africa, Wednesday, only on CNN, in association with Zenith Bank. CNN original series Anthony Bourdain Parts Unknown, Sicily.
An octopus. Cuttlefish. Pancetta. Leonata. Oh, that looks good. This juice. How do you say it in Italian? Swordfish. Looks like hell. Tastes like heaven. Smells good in here. Chin. Caponata. That's old school. That's Sicily right there.
Anthony Bourdain Parts Unknown, Sicily, only on CNN.
I'm Ben Wiedemann in Rome, and this is CNN.
Live from CNN Hong Kong, I'm Pauline Chu.
I'm Max Foster at CNN London. A warm welcome back to World Business Today. Let's take a look at the European markets for you. All indices are up on hopes that a deal could soon be reached over the US debt ceiling. It really is the only story in town, and actually a pretty positive start to the day, all up more than 0.5%, heading towards 1%. So a deal possible sooner rather than later, Pauline.
Yeah, as the clock is ticking, and we're seeing a similar picture here, Max, in the Asia-Pacific region, where most of the indices are up on optimism that Washington will strike a deal, even though they are pushing it to the limit. But the Shanghai Composite ended the session down despite strong gains in healthcare shares. Banking shares were down. The Bank of China dropped more than 1% today. But on the flip side, on the Hang Seng, shares of Chinese banks were some of the gainers after data showed that more loans were made in the month of September than expected. So the Hang Seng ended the session up by 0.5%. Now, the Aussie dollar is stronger on signs that an interest rate cut is not likely to happen in the near term, according to the Reserve Bank of Australia's minutes from its October meeting, although they did say that they will not eliminate the possibility of a further rate cut, even though they are at record lows at the moment. Max?
Stocks in the US closed higher, posting slight gains. Trading volumes were low. Monday was the Columbus Day holiday in the US, so banks and many businesses were in fact closed. But the Dow still managed to end the session up nearly 0.5%. The tech-heavy Nasdaq gained 2/3%. And the S&P 500 also closed higher. Wall Street's gains followed headlines that US lawmakers were nearing an agreement on Thursday's deadline to raise the debt ceiling. There's one sector of the financial markets that's been most exposed to worries about a US default. Economist Nathan Sheets from Citigroup told CNN the worry hasn't gone away.
I would say the most striking place where we're seeing an effect of this stress is in the government bills market. So very, very short-term securities that are likely to mature over the next month or two. We've seen their yields move up meaningfully. People don't want to hold this stuff. They're not sure how it's going to be resolved over the next month or 6 weeks.
If President Obama and congressional lawmakers remain at an impasse, short-term Treasury bonds could be the focus of a sell-off. We'll have to wait and see what happens when bond markets reopen in the US in a few hours from now. But despite the uncertainty, there are signs of a deal being cobbled together in Washington. The leaders of the Senate, Democrat Harry Reid and Republican Mitch McConnell, say they're close to a deal to raise the debt ceiling and reopen the US government, but they aren't there yet and have just 2 days to work out the details and get the House on board before a potential default.
I'm very optimistic that we will reach an agreement that's reasonable in nature this week to reopen the government, pay the nation's bills, and begin long-term negotiations to put our country on sound fiscal footing.
Those discussions continue, and I share his optimism that we're going to get a result that will be acceptable to both sides.
The current framework outlined to CNN includes funding the government through mid-January and extending the debt ceiling until early February. Some changes to the Obamacare law would also be considered, including requiring income verifications for healthcare subsidies. Senate Republicans sit down to discuss this potential compromise later on Tuesday, but it could face an uphill battle in the House. Republicans there have yet to indicate how they feel about striking any sort of deal that doesn't defund or delay the health care overhaul. Now, while US lawmakers continue to drag their feet, the financial strain deepens for thousands of government workers who lost their income in the shutdown. Reen Marsh reports.
I'm not essential. The day before the government shutdown, CNN met Dee Alexander, a secretary at the Department of Agriculture.
You never really know what might happen because you don't know how long it's going to last.
2 weeks later, the shutdown is still in effect, and Alexander has stopped paying her car loan.
Do you decide that I'm going to have somewhere to live at, or do you decide that I'm going to pay my car note? It's like you, and then you also have to figure out what about food.
On Saturday, she received the last paycheck she'll get until the government reopens, $600 less than usual. Some of the furloughed have turned to food banks for help, like this one in Maryland.
What I keep hearing over and over is, I never thought I'd need a food pantry, but here I am.
The ripple effect of the shutdown also means no more car recalls. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has stopped looking for automobile defects. And the Centers for Disease Control has stopped tracking infectious diseases like the flu, something the agency's former director says could have dire consequences. Quote, I can attest to the very real potential for unnecessary pain, suffering, and death when the work of public health officials is curtailed, he wrote in an op-ed. And in South Dakota, ranchers digging out after an unexpected blizzard are dealing with tens of thousands of dead cattle. Call the U.S. Department of Agriculture for disaster assistance, and this is all they hear.
The U.S. Department of Agricultural offices are currently closed due to the lapse in federal government funding. The office will reopen once Congress restores funding.
Well, at that one food pantry we showed you in the piece, roughly 200 people received food. Now, that's on top of the food that same group passed out to families last week. Clearly, after receiving that final paycheck, families are now beginning to feel the pinch. Renee Marsh, CNN, Washington.
And the Washington shutdown has dealt quite an economic blow to the average American. How could anyone have prepared for this? Well, that's a question Piers Morgan put to financial expert Susie Orman.
If we hadn't just been coming out of one of the most major devastations to the United States, 2008, 2009, and so forth, maybe there would have been time to plan for this. But many people, Pierce, were out of work to no fault of their own, truthfully. We totally shrank during those years, and now they were just getting back on their feet again. So they didn't have time really to get their 8-month emergency fund back in place because they used it up over the past 2 years or 3 years that they were trying to get a job.
What is the best way for people in America who may not be high income, reasonably modest income, who want to set aside a bit of money? Should they do it weekly, monthly? How should they do it in the most effective way to capitalize on that income?
Most likely every time they get a paycheck. If they could automatically pay themselves first. Most people, the truth of the matter is, they don't have any money. They have credit card debt, car loan debt, student loan debt, mortgage debt, and the only money that they save is money usually in their 401k, their 403b if they work for a nonprofit, or their TSP if they're in the military. So here's what I would tell them. Stop putting money in a traditional 401k. Many corporations today now are offering you a Roth 401k. Contribute as much as you possibly can to that, up usually to the point of the match that your corporation gives. If you get into trouble, I hate when people take loans from a traditional 401k, because a traditional 401k is funded with money you have never paid taxes on. If you pay back that loan, you're paying it back with money you've already paid taxes on. So later on in life, you're paying taxes again when you withdraw it. Never a loan from a traditional. But in a Roth 401k, you've already paid taxes on that money. So if you need money now to get by, I don't have a problem with you taking a loan from a Roth 401k to get the gap. Biggest mistakes people make is they stop contributing to the stock market during times like this, stop contributing to their retirement accounts, or if they have money in the stock market, they withdraw it all. If they do that and they have time, 10 years or 20 years till they retire, will be the biggest mistake they ever make at this point.
That's Susie Orman there. We've also been hearing people in business say the debt ceiling impasse is affecting their own companies. Dara Karashahi is chief executive of the online travel retailer Expedia, and this is what he had to say to Richard Quest about the debt deadline.
It's time for the government to come through. If it doesn't come through, I think that there are a lot of issues that are going to come up in the financial sector, et cetera. But it looks like the energy is at least moving in the right direction at this point.
What is it that you fear? Because obviously in a travel company like yourself, besides business travel, discretionary leisure travel is often one of the first and few things that gets hit once people's confidence evaporates.
Well, I think that's the issue. It is confidence. We've had a number of years now of a slow recovery, both in the U.S. and Europe looks to have stabilized now. What neither the U.S. or Europe, or frankly the world, needs is another financial shock to the system similar to the one that we had in 2008. That's just something that we can't afford, and it's something that's unnecessary.
What do you fear might happen if they don't solve this by Thursday?
Sure. On the corporate side, the one pattern that we are seeing is we're seeing a lot of volatility. And we aren't seeing corporate spend come back quite as strongly as you would expect. So that tells me that corporations are fairly uncomfortable in this environment. And corporations need to feel safe as well as far as what the interest rate environment is going to look like, what the liquidity environment is going to look like, in order for them to invest aggressively to grow, as we have as a company over the past couple of as we have in the last couple of years. So we're hoping that that volatility passes through.
And that was the CEO of Expedia giving his take on the deadlock in Washington. Now, this Thursday is the official deadline for Congress to pass laws allowing the U.S. to stay below its borrowing limit. But even if Congress misses this midnight deadline, the Treasury still has $30 billion on hand to pay bills. But that will eventually run out and fast. In fact, Treasury Secretary Jack Lew says that's not a lot when you see the cash flow on any given day. On some days, Treasury has to make more than $30 billion in payments. Well, some of the biggest payments are needed for Social Security. $12 billion is due on October 23rd, and another $25 billion is due on November 1st. Now, that's according to the Bipartisan Policy Center. But making lifeline payments to senior citizens and the disabled is just one piece of the federal government's obligations. On October 30th, $2 billion in Medicaid payments to the poor are due to health care providers, and the following day, the Treasury has to pay out $6 billion in interest on the debt, which is why countries holding U.S. debt are very concerned. Now, 3 U.S. professors have been awarded the Nobel Prize for Economics. Eugene Fama, Lars Peter Hansen, and Robert Shiller were recognized for their work in understanding long-term trends in the price of stocks, bonds, and other assets. Shiller is also famous for warning about price bubbles in technology stocks and also the U.S. housing market. The Yale professor helped to develop the famous S&P Case-Shiller Home Price Index, and earlier he spoke about the prospect of a U.S. debt default.
Probably nothing big is going to happen. It should be okay. That's partly a political science. This is how you can't divide things up. It's my sense that we still have in this country a sense of cooperation that will emerge and prevent a default.
And Robert Shiller will be on Quest Means Business later on today. That's at 4 p.m. New York time, 9 p.m. London time.
Coming up, it was one of the most dangerous cities in the world. Not so long ago, the Colombian city of Medellin was ruled by drug cartels. Now, it's a city transformed. We'll take you there after the break.
New perspectives, new ideas, new voices. QF Radio. Find your frequency.
The fastest lap, in association with DHL.
Well, that was a very, very interesting race for both of the Red Bulls. They do still have clearly the best pace this year. However, as Mark was on pole and Sebastian was second, everybody thought that this is going to be a bit of a race. However, they did blow the start and ended up behind Romain Grosjean in the Lotus. And that meant that they eventually had to go for different strategies. Mark Webber for 3-stop, Sebastian for 2-stop. And that's when the race was decided and Seb won it with ease. Fastest lap award is a very prestigious title. And for Mark, it was such a pleasure to actually set fastest lap towards the end of the race on a soft set of tires in a reasonably light car. And I'm sure that helped him a little bit to enjoy the podium as he did, although he didn't win the race. Well done, Mark, for the fastest lap in the Suzuka Grand Prix.
The Colombian city of Medellin was once a city ruled by drug lords. It was a town that was a safe haven for extreme violence. But as Nick Parker reports, Medellin's landscape has undergone a complete overhaul. And now some are calling it the most innovative city in the world. Here's why.
An artery of community life. This winding outdoor escalator sends you through one of Medellin's poorest hillside areas. I have a lot of fun, says Mariana Savallo. You can take it wherever you want to go, and it helps bring up sick people. It also acts as a lifeline to the city centre and the job market. The project cost $5 million and took 2 years to build. It's symbolic of the area's transformation. Once these streets were strewn with rubbish and sewage. Now, as you can see, there's a real effort to keep them clean. It's just one of many projects that helped Medellin be named the world's most innovative city by the Urban Land Institute, a leading NGO. Just over 20 years ago, it was the world's most dangerous city. Its name's synonymous with the cartel run by drug lord Pablo Escobar. In recent years, the murder rate has plunged. The city has pioneered a theory known as urban acupuncture, reclaiming areas lost to cartels through strategic projects. The mayor says a scheme known as participatory budgeting, where citizens define local priorities, is central to its success.
One of the biggest things about Medellin is pride and love towards the city. That pride needs to be nurtured. How? Through civic participation. Through citizens feeling they participate in the construction, design, and approval of public works and government programs. For example, the metro. Inhabitants of Medellin feel proud of it because they feel they are the real owners of it.
Infrastructure is key to Medellin's innovation. For less than $1, citizens can ride the subway, then take a direct connection to a massive cable car system. This station is another example of a regenerated area. This was once one of the most crime-ridden areas of Medellin, where Pablo Escobar used to recruit assassins. Now, this library provides an iconic focal point of learning for the community and a way of fighting crime.
The community could see, but nowadays...
Italian architect Francesco Orsini was a member of the team that transformed the city.
We managed to bring in these low-income settlements a high standard of architecture. So we managed to dignify these spaces. So everybody today says, okay, this is my library, this is my public library, and I recognize, I identify myself with that beautiful design.
This museum, partly funded by the private sector, was built on the border of the rich and poor areas. In the same zone, a centre for innovation with a cluster of start-up companies. Back in the hills, private enterprise is also encouraged. Centres teach the basics to micro-entrepreneurs like Clara Ramirez. I have learned a lot, she says, like calculating costs and budgets, and computers. Now I have a few ideas if one day I have to present my work as an entrepreneur. Medellin decided its future lay in investing in its deprived areas, where most of the city's young people live. An obvious idea, perhaps, but one rarely executed. Nick Parker, CNN, Medellin, Colombia.
And still to come on the show, diplomacy through pandas. We explore China's unique way of getting what it needs by loaning out the endangered panda bear.
For centuries, the book has been the very symbol of learning. Yet throughout history, there's always been one small problem. The knowledge inside these books has only been within reach of a select few. But now that your SIM card can be your library card, all these books are available on any mobile device, which means they can reach people and places they never could before. So say goodbye to the book as we know it and say welcome to the new world.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson. Quest means business. Armand Paul. It's your new evening lineup tonight on CNN.
Welcome back to World Business Today. Now, if you want to know more about China's economic priorities, some people say just follow the pandas. Beijing has around 50 panda bears on loan to zoos all across the world, and China usually gets something in return. For example, Canada and France both signed uranium export deals with China at the same time they received their panda loans. Australia got a pair of bears in 2009 after it agreed to supply Beijing with uranium. Other countries with pandas include Singapore and Thailand, who have free trade agreements with China. Malaysia has signed papers and is currently awaiting for their own panda bears. Well, panda diplomacy is not a new type of business for China. I spoke with CNN Money's Sophia Yan, who researched this extensively, and asked her more about the practice.
China's looking for countries with lots of natural resources or advanced technology. For example, very recently, Scotland got their first pandas. They got two. And Scotland has salmon, they have petrochemical technology, and that's what China's been investing in. In the last few years, you've seen this happen over and over in Canada, in France.
So food, natural resources, the things that China needs. Also, they've struck a deal with Belgium and Malaysia. What were those deals about?
A lot of the Asian countries have free trade agreements with China. And in Belgium, for example, they have oil drilling technology. Energy technology is most definitely a priority for China, who's looking, of course, as the world's most populous country, to grow economically and strategically, and they need energy resources to do all of that.
And when a country gets the pandas, they sign some sort of a loan agreement, but then they have to fund the care of the panda and also research. I mean, how much does it cost, and how long are these agreements for?
Typically, a pair of pandas from China to another country costs about $1 million a year. The agreements usually last about 10 years, and there's often a renewal period for a few years after that. And in addition to the cost of the actual panda loan that these countries have, they also sink a lot of money into conservation projects, for example, habitat restoration, study of breeding techniques.
And so the idea is that even though they're spending this kind of money, they'll make it back in terms of revenues from visitors and ticket sales and that kind of thing.
Exactly. They can offset some of the costs as more visitors come to their zoos.
And we have seen examples when China gets mad at a country, they take away the pandas. That has happened recently, hasn't it?
That has happened. In the U.S. a few years ago, President Barack Obama continued on with the meeting with the Dalai Lama, and China took back, within 2 days, 2 panda cubs. All pandas, regardless of where they're born, actually belong to China. And even though they were contractually obligated to return to China at some point, this is seen as a significant move because of how close it was to when Obama took that meeting with the Dalai Lama.
And you can read Sophia's article on panda economics on the CNN Money website. She did so much research, she actually has a panda Excel spreadsheet. She also said that it costs at least $1 million to care for each panda, and feeding them is not a light errand. In Scotland, for example, the 2 pandas there eat 20 tons of bamboo each year, Max.
It was about to go up as well. I have to say we've got some extraordinary breaking news literally at the half hour on this, because that panda in Scotland, Chan, they thought was pregnant, and they had these teams in place working 24/7, standing by for this panda. It's been weeks.
Oh,
they had
really?
an expert over from China, a birthing panda expert, and they've just announced that actually that it's not pregnant, and that's literally come in the last hour.
Just too much bamboo.
So, exactly. So their bamboo bills will be coming down. That's one good thing. Now, the graffiti artist, meanwhile, we try to mix it up a bit here. Banksy has been making his mark lately in New York City, where his paintings regularly fetch tens of thousands of dollars. But Banksy clearly has a talent for making a statement. And for some people who may never have heard of Banksy, it was a chance to pick up a real bargain, as Ivan Watson reports.
The British street artist Banksy strikes again. The idea bringing art to the people in unexpected ways. This time on a random street corner in Queens, New York. Within hours, fans of all ages posed next to a stencil quoting Russell Crowe's sword-fighting general from the Hollywood blockbuster Gladiator. What we do in life echoes in eternity.
It's historical in many ways. She could say that she got a photo taken in front of an original Banksy that's no longer in existence.
Banksy is famous for being anonymous, surprising audiences with his politically themed art, which pops up on buildings in cities around the world, including here on Israeli security walls in the occupied West Bank.
Within hours, Banksy has turned this street corner in a neighborhood in Queens into an open-air art exhibit of sorts. The irony is, just a few days ago, fans could have bought one of his original canvases for just $60.
On Sunday, Banksy unveiled this video showing an elderly, unidentified man selling his stencils along New York's Central Park. He waited all day, yet only 3 people bought Banksy's art, for a total of just $420. Bargain basement prices in the high-priced world of art.
I think this was to poke fun at collectors and different buyers of his works, you know.
People like you.
Exactly.
Alex Benraman is a collector who plans to auction off earlier Banksy artwork for tens of thousands of dollars apiece.
He's always about being accessible, being open to the public, and just doing things for, you know, the city, the culture.
Every day this month, Banksy has said he will unveil a new piece of art in New York. The authenticity confirmed on his website. This truck full of puppet animals in the meatpacking district, another example. But missing this opportunity to buy Banksy's art for next to nothing is driving some of his most loyal fans crazy.
I think what Banksy did was brilliant. I think he really made a statement yesterday, so.
But you're kicking yourself.
Big time.
And you love this guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ivan Watson, CNN, New York.
Let's have a look at some other markets, the financial markets here in the UK. Investors are showing optimism that there could soon be a breakthrough in Washington, because it's really a US story this week. Deadline to raise the debt ceiling on Thursday, and the London FTSE is up a third of 1%. The other European markets as well up, with Zurich up more than 1%. So certainly a feeling of positivity, Pauline.
And we're also seeing that optimism here, Max, in the Asia-Pacific region, as most of the markets ended the session up on hopes that the politicians there, even though they've locked heads for almost 2.5 weeks now, that they may come to some sort of resolution. All the main indices up, except for the Shanghai Composite, which ended the session down by 0.2%. Banking shares were dragging the index there, even though the British finance minister is set to announce that it will loosen rules to allow Chinese investment banks to expand in the UK. And please do tweet me or Max if you have any opinions on any of the stories here on our show, from Panda Economics to the debt ceiling. Max.
That's it for this edition of World Business Today. Pauline and I will be back in 4 hours with the opening bell on Wall Street. CNN Newsroom is next.
Thinking of banking in Africa? Think Zenith. Zenith Bank PLC is one of the biggest banks in Africa, with about 1 million shareholders and over 300 business offices in Nigeria and subsidiaries in other African countries and the United Kingdom. Committed to the best possible customer experience. Zenith Bank, in your best interest.
This is one of the most prominent features of the African continent, the Sahara Desert. I've come to a place on the edge of the Sahara, which for centuries has been described as an oasis. I'm Errol Barnett, Inside Africa, and this is the starting point for my journey this week, which for the first time is through the North African country of Tunisia.
Inside Africa, Wednesday, only on CNN, in association with Zenith Bank. CNN original series, Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown, Sicily.
Our octopus, cuttlefish, pancetta vionata. Oh, that looks good. This juice, how do you say it in Italian? Swordfish, looks like hell, tastes like heaven. Smells good in here.
Chin. Caponata.
That's old school.